Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I cannot watch that video without chills or without tearing up. Just gorgeous. I'm Mark Golub, and of course, the piece you just saw was done by the magnificent Zamir Chorale, simply the premier choral group in the Jewish world. The Zamir Chorale has performed everywhere, in leading concert halls here in America, in Montreal, in London, of course, throughout the state of Israel. Zamir has performed with the greatest of conductors of this generation, Leonard Bernstein, Daniel Barenboim, Zubin Mehta, to name just a few, and many of the top performers and musicians who appreciate both the artistic quality and Jewish neshama, the Jewish soul of the Zamir Chorale. They've been part of Zamir concerts, including many who sadly are no longer with us. Danny Kaye, Herschel Bernardi, Richie Havens, songwriters Naomi Shemer, Debbie Friedman, and the great Theodore Bickel. They all shared the stage with the Zamir Chorale. And of course, as is true of any iconic institution, there's a driving force who's helping to shape the arc of the Zamir Chorale and to help it attain its unique, transcending contribution to life. It's an honor for me to welcome to L'Chaim a musical genius, a brilliant musical talent, who continues to be the conductor of the Zamir Chorale, and who then went on to create the Zamir Choral Foundation, and then the HaZamir International Jewish Teen Choir, and a man whom I'm proud to say has been a longtime friend, Matthew Lazar, known to all his friends as Matty, who's been a guest conductor of symphony orchestras throughout the U.S. and Israel, appears regularly with the great cantors of our generation, and who can be seen conducting at Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, and major concert halls worldwide. And later this month, on Sunday afternoon, March 31st at 4 p.m., Mary Lazar's Zamir Choral Foundation will be presenting its annual HaZamir concert with 400 teens on stage at Lincoln Center's David Geffen Hall. It is such a pleasure to have you at this table. You know, we've been trying to do this for a long time.
Yes,
Thank you for making it. I adore you. I adore the work you've done. I adore your wife. But What you've done has been an extraordinary contribution to Jewish life. And I am just thrilled to be able to share what you do with our L'chaim and JBS audience.
Thank you.
My friend.
My
Thank
pleasure.
You, my friend.
Feeling is mutual.
Thank you. So I wanted to start with you, and then we'll go to the Choral Foundation. There's such Jewishness that comes out of all your work. You are a traditionally committed Jew. I want to know where this comes from. You know, where were you born? What was your family like? What was it like growing up? If you and I had been friends when we were both kids, who were you and what were you like?
Well, I was a Brooklyn Dodger fan. I can say that straight out.
So we share the Brooklyn Dodgers. Who's your favorite?
My favorite? I'd have to say that Jackie was my favorite.
Me too. Yeah. I knew we were kindred spirits on levels that I hadn't. Exactly.
I actually had the opportunity to meet him once.
Did you?
In Williamsburg. It was one of these corporate events
yes.
for the Dodgers at the Williamsburg Savings Bank.
How old were you?
I was in the 3rd grade, and my parents took me out of school to meet Campy and the whole crowd. It was awesome.
You know, people don't understand the romanticism that really existed in the 50s when you and I were growing up as kids, and the Dodgers and the Giants and the Yankees. And as one, I'm a huge baseball fan, so I still love the game, but it's not the game you and I.
Well, there was something special about the Dodgers and being Jewish, of course, in Borough Park, where I grew up.
And why was that?
Because the Dodgers slogan was always "Wait till next year," and that sounded like the Seder to me. B'shana haba, l'shana haba.
Exactly.
And it was spring training time.
That's so great. You understood exactly. Okay, so you're growing up in Brooklyn.
And my parents are very committed, knowledgeable Jews who are also excellent amateur musicians.
Really?
So my father would play the piano, my mother would sing.
What did your father do for a living?
He, at the end, was in his father-in-law's juvenile furniture business, but he had done many things in Jewish education beforehand.
What was his name?
His name was Jacob Lazar.
And your mother's name?
Sylvia.
What was Sylvia like?
Sylvia was a soprano and a music teacher in a public school.
So you grew up, music was all around you.
I learned the alphabet from the notes on the piano. When I got to H in the 1st grade, I said, there's no H. It turns out there actually is an H at the piano. It's the German letter for B.
How young were you when you learned the piano?
I started at 4. My sister had started several years beforehand.
So she's older?
She's older than I am.
Just the two of you?
Just the two of us.
What's her name?
Her name is Nina.
Okay, so Nina
and Mati.
And Mati.
Little Mati Lazar, yes.
Okay. And she's also piano?
She is a great harpsichordist who lives in Israel, but she was a pianist then.
Okay. Did you love it, do you think, as a child?
Definitely. There was no such thing as not having music as a way of expressing ourselves. Mm-hmm. For us, the issue was, who's going to get to the piano? And my parents, at one point, were able to actually get 2 pianos. One was a little upright,
yes,
and we would play whenever we wanted to. But it wasn't practicing for practicing's sake. It was a way. It was, people who are in the music field know that it's a form of music therapy too. You're expressing yourself. You have your emotions come out, and if for good or in sadness. Mm-hmm. But I was really trained with a beautiful piano teacher, as was my sister.
That's lovely.
Lillian Stern is her name.
You said, by the way, you had an upright, and you also had?
We had a baby grand. And it was only 1 year we had that little upright. It was not in the greatest quality, but it served its purpose.
Okay.
But the way in which I was brought up, well, I'll encapsulate it for you. On Shabbos,
yes,
my father would take me to Temple Beth El. We'd hear Moshe Kosovitsky daven with the choir. And then when Shabbos was over, my sister and I, being so small, would sit on the leaves of the piano while my father played Schubert and Gilbert and Sullivan, and my mother sang.
This is unbelievable.
And then afterwards, we'd watch her show of shows with Sid Caesar. So that's like the upper 1%.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's interesting, Schubert and Gilbert and Sullivan. So your father had a broad interest in music, right?
Right.
What about show music? Did you hear that?
Show music was not
Not
such a
so
big
much.
thing in our family. The furthest we went into that was Gershwin,
Uh-huh.
who was, of course, an important Jewish star,
Yes.
and Leonard Bernstein and Aaron Copland, the three main Jewish composers, American Jewish composers.
In your home, what kind of Jewishness?
Traditional. A Shabbos.
Every Friday night.
Every Friday night. Zmiris, table songs.
All four of you.
All four of us.
Did you have guests sometimes?
We had some family guests. Sometimes it would just be us. We loved it when it was just us.
Oh,
My father was the bass, my mother was the soprano, my sister sang what it was left over, and so did I.
harmony?
Harmony.
Harmony.
Serious harmony.
Okay, so what were some of the Zmirot you did?
Well, in our family, it was, my father had a wonderful sense of humor. So we would sing, for example, Yari Bon, or Tzur
Which
Mishalom.
melody? Let me hear it.
Well, the trick was to do, every verse would be in a different melody.
Oh, you
And,
do Yari Bon Olam.
That would be one.
Yes, and then give me another one.
Yari Bon Olam Ve'olmaya, Yari Bon Olam Ve'om. And the trick would be, when the next verse would come, how you would be able to immediately snap into the next tune, because the old tune was still controlling your mind.
Yes. Others. Yari Bon is one.
Tzur Mishalo.
Tzur Mishalo.
Those were the two big ones that we played this
You
little
do Shalom
game with.
Aleichem?
Shalom Aleichem. We walked through the house singing Shalom Aleichem.
Ah,
That was the minhag of the family.
ah.
And we sang it 3 times, of course. And it was it's one of the sweetest memories I still have.
Yes. Explain to our audience that might not understand, why did you walk? What was the point that you were basically symbolizing as you walked through the house singing Shalom? Did you do the
We did that.
Shalom Aleichem?
There was no other at that
Okay,
point.
right, right. So why?
Well, we're looking for the angels to come and help us greet the Sabbath.
Yes.
And going around, it was, we knew we weren't really going to see the angels, but it was a way of elevating ourselves to welcome Shabbat. And also the music was always the elevation for us, in my family especially. Mm-hmm. Music was a source and a point of pride as far as elevating our spirit.
We're going to come back to that. In terms of the Jewish tone of your house, when you think about it, first of all, you have warm feelings, correct?
Very.
Okay. Did it shape you?
It shaped me to who I am.
In what way?
My parents brought us up to understand that there was no conflict between being an American and being a Jew. There was no conflict between loving music, singing Bach, knowing Beethoven. My parents were experts at the classical composers. We had recordings of Mozart. We went to see performances of Mozart. We grew up with Bach. I remember when I was a kid, I said to my father, "Why are we listening to Mendelssohn? He's not as good as Bach." And my father said, "One day you'll understand." And one day I understood.
That's just marvelous, just marvelous. Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Music and Art High School.
Aha!
It was a schlep from Borough Park, but it was a very exciting adventure.
Yes. So at what point, Marty, do you begin to understand that you have a gift and you've got to really develop the gift musically, and this is going to be the direction of your life? At what point?
I was always drawn to the music. I always played the piano. And I was always interested in the destiny of the Jewish people, because that's what my parents engendered in both my sister and myself. And so it wasn't really ever a choice in that sense. The choice, if anything, was to become a more serious classical musician, or to try to use music as a way of inspiring Jewish life. Mm-hmm. And that
you
was,
chose the latter.
I chose the latter.
Why?
Because it was more meaningful to me, because it seemed to me that this is what the Jewish people needed, at least the community that I was in touch with. I saw how transformational music could be to teenagers, to adults.
Where did you see that first?
I saw it first in the Zamir Chorale.
So not until then.
The Zamir Chorale, which originally started as the Mossad choral group, from the summer camp of Mossad. And
Okay, I don't want to jump that far,
No.
okay? And where did you go to college?
Went to Queens College and then Ithaca College.
Okay. Are you involved in music on the college level as well?
Sure. Actually, I played cello in high school.
You're not only a pianist, you're a cellist.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm a cellist. I would say I
Really?
played the cello.
Uh-huh.
Pianists needed to take another instrument.
I
And
see.
my sister had taken the cello because our aunt had was a cellist. So it was kind of all in the family.
You begin to compose.
I was a composer in high school. I was a composer in college. I took composition with some Pulitzer Prize-winning composers, but I ended up being much more excited. And there's an excitement about looking at a blank piece of music paper. But I became more interested in interpretation than I was interested in composing. Arranging is as far into composing as I do.
But you do a lot of arranging.
I do a lot of arranging.
And look, you understand, and anybody who is watching who understands music, the arrangement has an enormous impact on how the music is experienced by those in the audience, don't you believe?
Definitely.
So that I have enormous regard for creative arrangers. And what you, I assume most of what I hear at Zamir, you've either arranged yourself or helped arrange.
It's not that high a percentage. When there are pieces that need arranging, I'll jump in. But very often we do serious pieces of music that have been
Arranged already.
that have been composed
Yes.
as four-part harmony pieces.
Yes. So you're out of college. What do you do after college?
After college, I returned to New York because
Yes.
I had gone to Ithaca, and I became the assistant conductor of the HaZamir Chorale.
It was created in 1960.
1960, and
By?
Stanley Sperber.
Stanley Sperber, right?
Right.
Okay.
And then I joined the choir in 1963,
Almost at the very beginning.
almost at the very beginning, when I was, I think, the 12th person to join the choir, which then blossomed to 100 plus. And then, of course, as you said, I turned it into a foundation.
How did that happen?
It happened because I realized that one choir is not enough. And the individual choir is great, but it's the activity of singing in a choir that's so profound. So I decided to create a foundation for choral music and created a choral festival. Then I created the teen choir.
You make it sound so easy. It wasn't that easy.
You're correct.
Yes.
It wasn't that easy.
Yes. So you have an idea.
I have an idea.
What do you do with the idea?
I run with the idea.
To whom?
To no one. I do it myself. I decide that there should be a choral festival. And so I have friends who are choral conductors. I say, you're my friend, you should meet my other friends. And my other friends and your friends should bring, and your friends should bring their choirs. And we should have a choral festival.
And it happened.
And it happened.
Okay. And I get chills again. So in a way, you know, it was the power of your personality and the friendships you had built which brought all of these groups together, correct?
Correct.
And what was the first performance?
The first time there was a choral festival, I worked with my friend Sipor Yachsberger, who you remember from the Hebrew Art School. She had been a great music teacher and a great visionary about the power of Jewish music. And we had a one-day concert of all the choirs that I knew. But that's not a festival. You can call it a festival, but
Still, where was it?
it was at the Abraham Goodman House, which then became the Merkin Concert Hall.
Ah.
And people came for one day, and each choir sang for 10 minutes, and there was no contact besides that. So I realized that was more important to have people spend a few days together and wake up in the morning, go to sleep at 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, and really get to know each other, because there's nothing like singing together first thing in the morning or last thing at night to develop the kind of real bonds, to really get rid of all the ideological baggage. In those days, it was a denominational baggage. Well, we yearned for the days, and then it became political baggage. Now it's really ideological.
Right.
And to get rid of that, where you're just singing harmony and you can accept each other.
Yes, you're talking about Orthodox Jews and Conservative Jews and Reform Jews all singing together at a time when sometimes they never mixed outside of music. That's your point.
They didn't mix outside of music or even in concerts. that was to get an audience, and then there's the other category of Israelis. Israelis and Americans were almost never at the same concerts together.
And in some way you were able to transcend that. Do you remember this happening, by the way, or is it only in retrospect that you see it? As you're living through this evolution, Muddy, do you say to yourself, you know, I have a goal, and the goal is not simply to have groups singing together, but the people who are in these groups getting to know each other and becoming part of one larger family. And holy cow, it's slowly happening. Were you aware of it at the time?
I was aware of it, but to me it seemed so organic that I wasn't surprised by it, and I don't want to say I took it for granted. It was a truth that I knew that needed to be brought into existence. And Tzipor Yochsberg was one of those people, one of my mentors. Elie Wiesel was another, besides my parents, of course, who said, if it's not done and you see it needs to be done, then do it.
Good for you. What's the difference between the Israeli audience and an American Jewish audience, which in some way had to be bridged? Is there a way to define it?
It wasn't so much the difference between the Israeli audience and the American audience, and the Israeli-American audience is, of course, now a completely different kind of idea. I think it's a matter of the style of the music and what kind of text you're singing. And the text that we always chose for choral music, which is an important part of choral music, is the text that resonates for every audience, at least the audience that we're interested in serving. Well, it's either text from our history or our culture or our worship service, and people have an opportunity to connect to. Even the text of the worship service is much more acceptable to people who have an issue with God or have no contact with God, because music is a spiritual experience without being religious. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really what really is so attractive about the emotional component of the music, is that you don't have to worry about anything except feeling good or paying attention to the emotion that the music evokes in you. And then if you can connect that to the text, then you're on to a much higher level.
That's lovely. Talk for one more moment about the distinction you just made, which I found fascinating. There's a distinction between spiritual and religious. That somehow what you just said was music taps into something that's almost like universal. And you use spiritual with that word, with that experience, as opposed to religious. In your mind, Money, what's the difference between spiritual and religious?
They can both be the same thing.
Yes.
They can be the same thing.
Yes.
But when I say spiritual, it's a way of describing an elevated state of consciousness where you feel bigger than, you feel in touch with the force that's bigger than just yourself.
Music does that.
Music can do that. Music does it all the time. Whether it's singing around a campfire, whether it's singing in a worship service, or whether it's singing to the radio, with the imaginary crowd in the other cars that are singing with you. You're in touch with a force that's bigger than yourself without losing yourself entirely.
Oh, I love it. You heard me say that this happens a lot with the music you do, but the opening clip that I did, I get chills. Do you understand what chills means for me?
I do.
Is that the way you experience it ever, or no?
Yes.
Okay. And do you get chills the 15th time you're doing the same song?
I do. I do, because the interpretation is different. This is a question that you can ask rabbis. Do they get the same chill, so to speak, when they're davening a silent devotion all the time? And when people repeat prayers, how do they keep it fresh? In prayers, sometimes you have to do more of the work. With music, you have an outside source that is affecting you. And I'm very lucky I speak music well.
Yes.
And it speaks to me. You know, some people choose music and music chooses you. So the interpretation of if the piece of music is a great piece of music, then you can reinterpret it forever and get chills.
You begin to conduct. At what point is when do you first conduct a chorale?
Well, I'll answer without the qualifier. The first time I'm conducting is when I'm 4 years old and I'm conducting American in Paris by George Gershwin, and I'm making believe I can play the trumpet too, and I know that I'm moving my hands. I know I'm not affecting anything, but it's a form of human, you know how they say Jews and Italians talk with their hands? Conductors do that too, and it's just a natural way of expressing the rhythm, expressing something of the line.
When you were 4 years old, were you using your hands?
I was using my hands.
Mm-hmm.
I remember it.
Mm-hmm.
My father said to me, if you love that trumpet part, why don't you learn the trumpet?
When do you now conduct for real?
I start conducting when I'm in high school.
What?
Well, I'm a little bit of a composer in high school, so
Yes.
I'm conducting the pieces that I wrote in high school with a pickup group of high school students.
Uh-huh.
And I'm assistant conducting the HaZamir Chorale, doing sectional work, learning how to move my hands and actually control or indicate to the group what it is that they should be doing with my hands,
Uh-huh.
which is not do what I'm telling you to do, it's do what I'm showing you to do.
Interesting. Do you love conducting?
I do.
When I watch you, I have the sense that you love what you're doing. I also have the sense that you are one with the people you are conducting. Do you understand what I mean by that? It is not conductor and group. It is in some way this organic oneness that you are helping to lead, and it seems again to me that you have enormous regard for the people who you are conducting. Am I correct?
You are correct and perceptive. It's a total organism. The conductor and the organism that the conductor is conducting have to be one and together. It doesn't always work that way. Very often there's a disconnect between the group and the conductor because there's no emotional connection. But in my case, and with my ensembles, there's always a very, very direct connection. That's the source of the power of the synapse. That's the source of the power of the music making, is that I give everything I have, and I show everything I have, and they do the same. And that's why we're together, because there's no hiding in the music.
Mm-hmm. I have experienced you in many settings. The one experience I have not had with you, I've not been in a choir of yours. So I've never experienced you as you help prepare a choir or for the performance. But I've seen the performance. I haven't seen the rehearsals. So many conductors are lunatics when they actually are preparing their group. And they can be brilliant. And very often you'll hear people in a choral group say, so-and-so is brilliant, but I can't stand him as a human being. He's impossible. To what extent are you, at times, impossible as you're preparing a choir?
When I was younger, I was very demanding. And it didn't occur to me that people weren't as desperate to make high-level music as I was. And I was never mean, but I could...
You were not mean.
I was never mean, but I could be very sarcastic in a humorous way.
To you it was humorous.
To most people it was humorous. People who were confident would laugh. I had a teacher who, even if you were unprepared, you'd go to his class knowing that he might attack you because it was so funny that you never took it personally,
Okay.
and I was trained in that way.
Okay.
And so that would be, but
you were demanding.
very demanding. And now I'm equally demanding, actually more demanding, because the older you get, the more you know there is there to try to extract. But it's been, my personality has been geared more towards raising people up because I stopped needing to get the satisfaction from those early groups that I needed to get that musical satisfaction, and I couldn't get it from them.
That's very
and
honest.
And then when I grew up, when I became older and I had more experience with professional ensembles, then I could get everything I needed from that. So my need for getting that exquisite moment that you've been describing in the past fell away because I was getting it from other ensembles, and I didn't need to get that from the group that I was conducting.
Okay. You know, your general persona is you're soft and gentle. It's hard for me to imagine you're ever being mean, and you said you were not mean. It's even hard for me to imagine that you were demanding, although I can imagine it, but it's hard for me to imagine it. And what I understand now is you have a different sense of who you are, and therefore your needs have changed vis-a-vis the people you're singing. You know, many of the people you're singing are not professionals, correct?
Correct.
These are people who love music, or they want to love music, and sometimes they even think they can sing better than they can, but they love singing. And, you know, and I hope many of our viewers saw the l'chaim I did with your wife, Vivian, and we talked about the process of selecting people for the choir. And it's not like anybody who wants to can be in Zamir, correct? You do auditions.
For every one of our
Everyone,
ensembles.
right? And I assume sometimes there are very lovely people who just are not quite qualified to be singing in Zamir, which has a level of excellence that you want all of your participants to attain, correct?
Correct.
And there must be moments when it's painful to be able to have to say to somebody, no.
It is painful. It's more painful for them, but this is something that even if I had, in rehearsal, if I could be demanding, when it comes to letting people down, to let them know that their skill set is not the skill set that we need, I've always been very good at that, to let people know that they're appreciated as human beings, and maybe they should try improving their sight reading or take voice lessons, or why don't you try this other choir for a bit and get a little more experience, because we need more experienced singers.
Then at some point, we add the teen, the HaZamir. How does that come about?
It came about because when I started singing Zamir, I was a teenager.
Yes.
So I knew the value of teenage singing. But I saw in my professional life at conferences like the ACDA, American Choral Directors Association, which is really an association of high school conductors, and they would have conferences, and you'd see these teen choirs singing in tuxedos at 8 o'clock in the morning by heart with unbelievable dedication. And I said to myself, there's got to be something like that for Jewish teenagers, where a Jewish teenager who is talented doesn't need to say, oh, if I'm going to sing Jewish music, it's not going to be great Jewish music, so I have to sing non-Jewish music. And so I created HaZamir. It was an opportunity to create first-rate Jewish music for first-rate Jewish musicians of a young age.
This is how I first learned about Zamir. Somebody you know well, Eli Gurak, who was one of the initial teens that you
Correct.
helped learn. He was in Zamir. He loved HaZamir, and then he gets married.
That's their first. That's the first HaZamir couple.
Yes.
Whose daughters sing in HaZamir. It's the second generation.
Isn't that
HaZamir.
amazing?
It's scary but amazing.
And they're very special people. Ellie and Sherry are very special. So I want to talk to you about HaZamir. They sing multiple times every year?
They rehearse on a weekly basis.
Yes.
In every chapter, 39 chapters across the U.S. and Israel, and they're rehearsing the same repertoire every week.
And they, in other words, you decide on a repertoire that's going to be across HaZamir.
Right.
Yes. And by the way, I have here one of your brochures, and it lists all the HaZamir groups, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in Israel.
Correct.
So in 9 different communities, you've got Israeli kids singing with HaZamir.
Correct.
And then in America, there's 3 columns, that's like 30 of them.
29 exactly.
It's amazing, by the way. And it's not a question of do you take it for granted, but do you appreciate here that you have opened up a window for kids to express themselves not only musically but Jewishly through HaZamir, yes?
That was the intent. The intent was to be able to create an environment for Jewish teens who wanted to sing Jewish music at a high level with other Jewish teens self-identified as Jewish, no halacha involved in that regard, and having people really enjoy themselves. And what's great about choral music is that, first of all, you're enjoying the music. That's the emotional component. But at the same time, your brain is processing the text. So you're having an emotional and an intellectual experience at the same time while you're all breathing together. And 400 teens on stage breathing together is no small, exciting event.
It is. By the way, that is a phenomenon in and of itself, is it not?
Yes.
Why?
Because it speaks to, it involves really a complete and total involvement with the group without losing the individuality. And everyone was looking really for some kind of a team sport where you don't lose your individuality. Vivian loves to call choral singing a team sport, and it is. But it's really a text with the music.
Yes.
And the music is a commentary on the text. And it's not only a commentary on the text, it's a commentary in 4 parts on the text. So everybody is singing something, and they're all focused on how they're contributing to the whole while they experience this catharsis and having fun at the same time.
Now, once a year, they all come together?
They all come together once a year, but during the course of the year, we have retreat weekends. So we have a retreat weekend for the Northeast. We have a retreat weekend in the Midwest, in the Southeast, and of course a retreat in Israel as well.
Where?
We've had it in Beit Sha'an for several years. This year, we are in Yerucham, which is pretty far down south.
And roughly, how many young people, how many teens will get together in Israel and spend this weekend with you?
It's 100 teens in Israel.
Amazing, amazing. Are you there?
We wouldn't miss it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's extremely exciting. And what's so interesting is that this whole idea of why I created HaZamir and really branched out to Israel was because the Israeli teens really don't know what pluralistic Judaism is. Mm-hmm. And when we bring them here, they all of a sudden understand it. Mm-hmm. And the American kids need some chizuk and some strengthening of their appreciation of Israeli teenagers their own age. Mm-hmm. And that is really, I think, addressing a need that Vivian and I strongly believe is really an important component of future success for the Jewish people.
Good for you.
That generation knowing each other.
Okay, and I want to talk about that for a moment, because once a year you're at David Geffen Hall in Lincoln Center, and there are 400 kids on the stage together. I say
teens,
kids.
yeah.
Yeah, they're teens. And they come in when, if the concert is on a Sunday, when do these kids get together?
For the first time all together.
Yes.
On Thursday.
So Thursday, they all come together.
Correct.
And you take a hotel, or you take some
We stay at a hotel.
Okay. So you have 400 kids at this hotel. What's the program for them over the course of this Thursday, Friday, Saturday, prior to their singing at David Geffen Hall?
How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. So they're rehearsing a lot. But
all together?
All together.
Okay.
Sometimes we'll divide it up into smaller groups. And actually within the framework of HaZamir, we have several subsets. We have a chamber choir, which is the most advanced, most talented of the teens. That's a special track that I conduct. And then there's a young leadership track, which really trains choral singers can be leaders, and sometimes they're not the typical leaders that you would expect, because they're the kids who know the music the best. They're the kids who come out into their leadership skills through the music. And we have alumni as well.
Yes. You do the chamber choir. Who directs the others?
Every chapter has its own conductor. So each of the 39 conductors will be coming. And they'll all get a chance to do something during the course of this retreat.
Okay.
Only 9 of them will probably be conducting on stage at David Geffen Hall.
Okay. So that's why when I'm there, I'm seeing different conductors come out to do different numbers.
Correct.
Correct? Okay. And You know, Mari, what about the dynamic? Here you have, for 3 or 4 days, American Jews, American teens, and Israeli teens all together. Yes, they're joined by the music, but many of them have never met each other. I want you to describe what that's like. What's the interaction between the American teens and the Israeli teens?
Well, it's not entirely accurate that they don't know each other, because many of these teens started in 9th grade, and by now they're in 11th or 12th grade sometimes. So they've had an experience of seeing these kids, these teens, I should say, and they look forward to these opportunities. In fact, often we have American teens going to Israel, and they have the reverse experience, where they seek out their Israeli friends. But in addition to that, we have, there's a partnership between certain cities in America and certain cities in Israel. And so those chapters join each other sometimes before and sometimes after. So singers, for example, of Cleveland will be hanging out with the teenagers from Beit Sha'an for the 3 days before the event. So they know each other quite well.
Okay.
So, but the main point that I think you're driving at is the unbelievable friendliness. This is such a non-judgmental group of teens. They're well-behaved. Their fun is harmonizing. Mm-hmm. They love harmonizing with people who they haven't harmonized with before. Mm-hmm. It's a different sound. It's a different person. It's a very safe way to get to know someone.
Do you think they learn about the other's culture and life? Do Israeli kids learn about what it is to be an American Jew? Do American kids learn what it is to be an Israeli?
One of the parts of the festival is what we call a mifgash, which is a meeting. And we have the 12th grade Israeli teens meeting in a very open, not unsupervised, but non-directed conversation with 12th graders from the U.S. And they really get into the serious issues of the day.
Like what?
Oh, about Zionism, about how it's portrayed in America, about the army, about pluralism in America, which is kind of an anathema to the Israeli teens. I have to tell you something really funny. One of my favorite, if not my favorite, story of that culture clash is we had some 12th grade, this is several years ago, some 12th grade Israeli boys who were thinking about, you know, what regiment they're going into. They're serious, and they're trying to meet some American girls and hang out. So on Friday night, these Israeli boys are talking to, happens to be a group of American HaZamir girls from Los Angeles. They say, what are you doing after the rehearsals? You want to have some ice cream or something? And the LA girls say, we're sorry, but we have to learn our Kriya for reading the Torah tomorrow. And these Israeli boys are looking at these LA girls who, you know, are dressed in a certain American style. And the word reading the Torah is such a shock. But I love that. So that's the kind of friendships, instant, oh my gosh, is that possible?
Mm-hmm. I'm assuming that in some way, HaZamir is self-selective. You're going to get pretty good kids. We keep saying kids, they're teens, but I'm going to use the word kids. You're going to get good kids, and you're going to get American Jews, American teens, who have some kind of positive perspective already on Israel. Is that fair to say?
Mostly so, but not entirely so. In our survey, we have, I think it's about a third of our teens are non-affiliated. And the only thing that they do that's Jewish is HaZamir. So they don't really know too much about Israel. They don't know too much about, they only know what probably their parents tell them, or what they see on television or read in the newspaper. So it's not really a take for granted kind of situation.
So it's good for them to actually spend time with lovely Israeli teens, yes?
That's the goal.
Okay. And you know, very often Israelis have no sense of who American Jews are, of what Jewish pluralism is in America, nor do they understand the extent to which American Jews, who care about Israel, are passionate in their caring about Israel. Have you seen any sign of young Israeli teens going, boy, I didn't know that, and it surprises me, it pleases me, and oh, I didn't understand what it meant a Reform Jew is, a conservative Jew is. Any of that? Well,
we have a service on Friday night, 3 different services, a Reform service, a conservative traditional service, and an Orthodox service. And
All going on
all going on at the
simultaneously.
same time within 100 feet of each other.
Yes.
And the migrations between the services are fascinating to watch. And the Israelis are very comfortable in the Reform service, at least as far as the music making is concerned. And they do have aha moments. And that's really why we do it. Even the adults have aha moments. And they get a sense of what it is that we don't have this in Israel. And the American kids see their friends who wear exactly the same clothing, listen to exactly the same music, especially in this age. And the only thing that's different is that these Israeli teens are going to be going into the army. And what's that about? But we had a very interesting experience where some Israelis were shocked to see, to your point, that American HaZamir kids were joining the Israeli army, or were going there for a year as a lone soldier, or to hear an Israeli, and for an Israeli teen to hear an American Jewish teen arguing passionately about Israel and why it's so important and why it has to be there. And one of our great quotes from an Israeli teen is, I never felt more proud to be an Israeli than when I came to America and sang in HaZamir.
Isn't that wonderful? Doesn't it make you and Vivian feel so like you're really doing something of value to the Jewish people, you know, to Amcha, yes?
Yes, that's why we do it.
Yes. You know, Avraham Infeld, who for a long time was involved in Hillel and was involved in Birthright Israel, he speaks in America, and one of the things he says often is, he describes being with a group of Israeli teens and American teens, and they're having dinner together, they're doing Zmirot together, and they're doing Birkat HaMazon together, the grace after the meal. And what is interesting for him to watch is you have all of these American Jews singing passionately something that they've learned and know and love. And the Israelis are listening because they've never been taught Birkat HaMazon. But the Israelis are the ones who understand every word,
Right.
while the American kids singing with gusto, for them have no idea what the words mean. It's not. It is an expression of something from within the American Jewish soul, but it's not cognitive. The Israeli, at the same time, can't participate. He doesn't know it, but at least he knows what's being
good.
said.
Right.
And I wonder if in any way that relates to anything you do.
There is that peering over the curtain into the other side and being astonished at what is there. And it's not so much that they don't understand the language. The Israelis understand the tefillot, and ironically, the only tefillah they really know is Kaddish. But
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, well, for a good reason.
Yes.
But we're very proud of the educational component of HaZamir, where we don't have American teens who are singing music at this concert and they don't know what it means. Not only do they know what it means, they know the content, they know the context, they know where it falls in the history and the culture of the Jewish people. And that's what's so powerful.
Absolutely. Again, there's so much that's extraordinary in what you and Vivian and everybody involved with Zamir, the Zamir Foundation that you created, and then, you know, we're talking right now about HaZamir, which is just one dimension, the teen dimension. But you have done something that is remarkable, and it touches so many lives. And you know it also, we talked about it at the beginning of the show, music elevates. So what you have for anybody who's sitting in the audience, listening, whether it's to any one of your concerts, and I did to be at David Geffen Hall every year, and it's a soaring, emotional experience. It's an experience that engenders pride in everybody who's sitting there. I'm normally sitting right in front of Ruth Westheimer, who may be your biggest single fan. But you understand that while you're on stage, this is what's happening. And it's happening in a Jewish context where you're using music to do something that is about Jewish identity and Jewish neshama, Jewish soul. And I'm thinking to myself, this didn't happen by accident. This is something you were consciously creating. And again, it comes back a lot to all we talked about your own Jewish roots. But it's how I want to sort of end with you. I want to end about where Matthew Lazar looks and sees the Jewish community today. Not simply teens, but American Jewry today. And what it is about American Jewry that worries you the most as a committed traditional Jew, and what is it that gives you the most sense of optimism? Take the first one. As you look at Jewish life today, and I wanted to, I know you have to be careful what you say. You have a public role, but I still want to know, what is it, Mari, that really worries you?
I think it's the complete lack of community. There was a time when the Jewish community was really unified, often because of the outside threat. But then when the outside threat disappeared, the Jewish community went, in many ways, went off in individual ways. And it's not only in a political way, it's in an ideological way. Even the synagogue, in many cases, has really broken apart as people are looking for something less formal. People are looking for contact with divinity. People are looking for social justice. People are looking for different things. And it's worrisome, not that they're looking for that, because that's what the search is all about. Avraham famously said, no, that's not God. No, that's not God. Looking for truth, looking for wisdom. So the search is not the problem. The problem is the demonization of others. The problem is not being able to have a civil conversation. The problem is lack of knowledge, which is, I think, really, for me, the most serious danger to the Jewish people today, not knowing our own history. But the optimistic side is, yes, I know, and it usually comes to me through music.
Yes.
Because I know that when people are harmonizing together, or people are in a room where there's harmony being created, and especially the great part of a choir is that it's a community, and it models community, which is why everybody wants the third grade choir to come and sing for them at a big event, because it's hopeful and you see that people can really work together. And that gives me hope. Being in the middle of that nexus of the audience being inspired, of the singers being inspired, of even without an audience, just feeling that togetherness, feeling that pride, feeling that unencumbered feeling of joy, of being Jewish, of being confident in it. And it can be done. I know that music is one way of doing it, and music really does break down those borders. Because whether it's the adults or the teenagers, or this new ensemble that we've created called Zamir Noded, which is for college students and young adults into their early, until 30 or so, who are old, who are graduates of HaZamir, who look for places to sing. There's a real need for people to make harmony together. It's a universal need. People want to be together. They want to avoid the fights, I think. It's less so than it used to be, but music will allow you to do that. And I see over and over again disparate groups of people, religiously disparate, politically disparate, generationally disparate, coming together. And if the music is the right music, they will be together. And for that one brief moment, even if it's 2 hours in a concert, people will have the experience, the invaluable experience of being together without any of those other ideas or other parts of their brain or other critical voices saying, you don't belong here, or what about him, or what about her, or what about them? And it's just a matter of being together. And the more you get that experience, the more you can provide that experience, the stronger we become.
You are fabulous. You know, I love you so much, and I appreciate your friendship and what you do in terms of Jewish life. You are making the future possible. If there's a Jewish future, in part, you're helping to make that happen. And I am so grateful for all you do. And I'm grateful for the time you give me here. Kol tu v'hatzlacha. And may you only go from strength to strength. And every time I need you, I want you in that chair. Fair enough?
Anytime, anytime.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. And I know that if people want to hear what the Jewish future sounds like, they can come to David Geffen Hall and they'll hear it.
Lovely. Matthew Money Lazar, founder and director of the Zamir Choral Foundation, one of the most talented musicians on the Jewish scene today, one of the sweetest human beings in the Jewish world today. And remember, If you'll be in the greater New York metropolitan area on Sunday, March 31st, treat yourself to an extraordinary afternoon of fabulous choral music as HaZamir, the Zamir Choral Foundation's International Jewish Teen Choir, will present its annual gala concert at David Geffen Hall at Lincoln Center. And in addition to the 400 singers of HaZamir, you'll also get the thrill to Nurit Hirsch, the composer of Oseh Shalom, Bashana Haba'ah, that Sunday afternoon, March 31st at 4 p.m. at David Geffen Hall at Lincoln Center. And if you're there and you see me and my wife Ruth, and we're there every year, please say hello. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to any of the ideas expressed on this edition of L'Chaim. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook page, or tweet me. I look forward to hearing from many of you. And remember, you can now listen to the L'Chaim podcast with past L'Chaim shows as well as the new ones we add each week. The L'Chaim podcast is available on iTunes or Google Play or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'Chaim, my friends, to life.
L'Chaim is a presentation of Jewish education in media.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please, indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.